In today's video, we're talking about how far in advance should you promote a webinar. First, I'm going to tell you my typical process for promoting my webinar and how far in advance I usually choose to promote. And then I'm going to tell you my top 3 tips that you should keep in mind while promoting your webinar. So how far in advance do I usually start promoting? I typically give about 1 to 2 weeks. Even 2 weeks seems like a little bit of a stretch because you might sign up for that webinar and forget about it. And sure, people can put it in their calendar, but they lose that intrigue or that excitement that they get when they first sign up for it and maybe thought, oh my gosh, this is gonna be awesome. And then time passes and we get distracted and other things come up and they think, maybe I'll skip that webinar or I forget about it or whatever. So I wanna give them a shorter window of time so that they're excited that it's happening very soon. There's even some webinar platforms that you can use for pre-recorded webinars that can give your audience the option for a just-in-time webinar or one that's an hour away, the next day, the next week. That's for pre-recorded, but for these purposes, I'm explaining to you how we plan our webinars for when they're live. Now, typically you want to do a live webinar to get that engagement with your audience, be able to interact with them, answer questions for them. Yes, pre-recorded webinars can be great for getting people to register for them, but the retention, you're gonna wanna test to see if people stay longer when you're live because they see that you're interacting. If they start to see that it's pre-recorded, they might think, I don't know if I'm gonna stay for this because I can just watch the recording anytime. When it's live, it gives your audience this element of like FOMO, that if they don't attend live, if they're not here right now, they're gonna miss out. So if you can do it live, it gives them a reason to come on, to be able to have that time with you, interact with you, and retain them to the end of your webinar, where that's where the magic happens. That's where the monetization happens. So after hearing that, is 1 or 2 weeks more or less than you maybe expected? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're already running webinars, what is your typical practice? Now let me tell you the top 3 tips that I think you should keep in mind while you're promoting your webinar. The first one is you're probably gonna get the most signups the closer you get to your webinar. Again, like I said, if you have a webinar and you're promoting it 2 weeks out, that might be great for letting them get to know about it, but maybe they don't sign up yet thinking, it's far in advance, I don't know what I'm doing 2 weeks from now. But that's where the retargeting comes in, you being able to keep talking about it as we get closer. And as you get closer to that date, that gives them that element of urgency, like, oh, I gotta sign up for this or else I'm gonna miss it. So keep in mind, if you're promoting your webinar and you're like, oh my gosh, people aren't signing up yet, know that they're likely to sign up the closer that you get. Now, I'm not saying that that's the only problem if you're not getting registrations. You might also want to look at your hook, at your headlines, at how you're incentivizing people to show up, how you're incentivizing them to register and attend live. There's a few different things that you might want to look at if you're not getting those registrations. But ideally, you're going to get most of those registrations in the last couple days or even the night before your webinar. The next tip you should keep in mind is to be constantly running those webinars. Russell Brunson teaches the perfect webinar formula, and he teaches that you should keep doing your webinars live until you have them optimized. And you're always going to want to be optimizing your webinar. You don't just write a webinar once and think that that's it. You want your webinar to be converting. You want it to be able to reach your audience and engage with your audience at the highest level. And typically you're looking for about a 10% conversion rate, that the people who show up live, 10% of them are signing up for your offer at the end of it. So keep optimizing. Look at maybe any gaps in your webinar or spots where people are falling off, that they close out of the webinar, or why they're not signing up. And because in a webinar, especially when it's live, you're getting that live interaction, you can ask them questions or hear the questions that they're asking that'll give you cues for the next time you run the webinar, maybe what kind of content you can add into it to address any objections that they might have. For many entrepreneurs, they'll host their webinars every week, or like I mentioned, you can also have pre-recorded webinars. Now, I wouldn't recommend jumping to pre-recorded because I don't want you to just set it and forget it. And even when you are at the level where you feel like your webinar is converting really well, you're ready to put it on a platform where it's pre-recorded and people can sign up for it all day, every day, please make sure that you're not just like setting it and forgetting it. You want to continuously be looking at the analytics, checking the metrics, and still optimizing it. You can take that pre-recorded version, edit it, add more to it so that you're constantly optimizing it. Before we move into my third tip to keep in mind when promoting a webinar, make sure that you're subscribed to this channel because I'm putting out more content like this every single week. So the third tip, and this is the most important, is that the trick isn't just getting them to sign up for your webinar, it's getting them to show up for your webinar. If they get to your webinar opt-in page and they register, they say they're gonna come, that's great. But what good is it if no one comes? That's like the saddest birthday party ever. So make sure that you're giving them incentives to show up and to be there live with you. And some of the strategies to get them to show up can be as simple as reminding them. You should have an email nurturing sequence after they register. Don't just assume that because they registered, RSVP'd, said that they're coming, that they're gonna come. Make sure that there's a link in the email that adds it to their calendar. Have an email automation sequence to remind them about the date that's coming up, especially the day of. Hey, our webinar's in 6 hours. Hey, our webinar's in an hour. It's starting right now. Grab your popcorn, join us. Another thing you can do to incentivize them to come is to offer some rewards or prizes or giveaways, or hey, when you come to this webinar, I'm also gonna be giving everyone that attends this bonus. That's getting them to show up. The next trick is getting them to stay to the end. So the other thing you're gonna wanna do is create open loops within your content all the time, where maybe you're talking about a concept and you say, I'm gonna share more on that later. The other thing is at the beginning of the webinar, where you talk about maybe a prize that you're gonna give away. You make sure that that prize is given away to the end, and you have to be live. You have to still be here at this webinar to win. If I draw your name and you're not here, then unfortunately I'll go to the next person. So that's gonna incentivize them to register for the webinar, to show up to it, and to stay. So now you know how far in advance to promote your webinar and some of the tips and tricks to get people to show up and stay present on your webinar. The next thing you're gonna need to know is how to make money with your webinar. And I have a video just for that. So I'm gonna link in the description below my other video called How to Make Money with Your Webinar. I'll see you there.